Admiral Harry Harris gave a speech to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attacks. Now, in giving this speech, he took a not so subtle dig at San Francisco football quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who took a stand this particular season, 2016, where he decided that he would kneel every time the national anthem was played before a game. Now, so that you understand, players didn't even come out of the locker room before 2009 for that national anthem. Okay? And since then, we've learned that major sports organizations and major sports leagues are actually being paid by the government to trot out veterans, which I'm actually okay with that. What I'm not okay with is with the hypocrisy that follows it, but I'm actually okay with that. I don't have much of a beef. I don't love it, but I don't have much of a beef against that. I understand sometimes propaganda is useful and it uplifts the people, etc., etc. And if we're paying a small price for that, I'm kind of okay with that. That being said, for a man of that stature to take a shot at a civilian who is exercising his freedoms is just petty. It begs the question, did you forget why you actually defend our country? Did you forget what you're actually defending? Are you forgetting that those men and women that you're celebrating right now with that speech and with all of these ceremonies that we're having for Pearl Harbor at the 75th anniversary, did you forget what we tell everyone that they actually fought for? And we tell it to people every single day. Bottom line, they fought to protect our freedoms. One of those freedoms is the freedom of speech, which Colin Kaepernick, all by his lonesome at first, was exercising very, very quietly. He didn't stand up before the game with the media and make a big deal about it. He didn't have a press conference announcing that he was going to do this. He just did it. There usually aren't even any cameras there. Okay, you just have people in the stand, and if you've ever been to a game, most of those people are coming in from getting burgers and fries and etc. So who is he really hurting? A lot of people like to say that he's disrespecting our military members when he kneels for the national anthem. I mean, the national anthem was written 200 and some odd years ago by a racist, by the way. And if you actually read that third verse, which everyone is really upset about, which is why he chose that to kneel for, Francis Scott Key is disparaging slaves for one reason. And remember, they're slaves, which means they weren't paid. They were fed just enough so that they could get through a work day. So feeding them was more like a business expense than any kind of gesture of kindness on the slave owner's part. Okay, they fed them in the same manner that you'd feed your horses. You feed your horses so that they perform well during races. You feed your slaves so that they perform well picking your cotton. So let's all remember that Francis Scott Key, when he put that third verse in there and he spoke about the slaves who actually ran off and joined the British to fight with the British. Why? Because the British at that point had lawfully, not in practice so much, but lawfully abolished slavery. I think it was another 20 or 30 years before it was gone entirely, because they, understanding that slavery was at that time a very important part of the economy, they allowed it to be phased out like we do other things now. We don't tell a manufacturer, unless something is ridiculously unsafe, we don't tell them that you've got to start selling that pen right now today. We say, okay, we think that pen is bad for the environment, and we're going to give you 4 years to phase it out, 2 years to phase it out, whatever that may be. They made the same type of business decision with slavery. I'm not, excuse me, I'm not a dummy where I'm thinking that slavery, and anyone else who doesn't think that slavery was an absolute business at that time, you're off your rocker. So they did what they did in the interest of business, giving slave owners time to phase that out and find another way to support their business. But how in good conscience do you bash, unless of course you're a racist, do you bash a man who makes a decision that instead of being enslaved and watch his fellow men, himself, his wife, his children be raped and beaten daily. Instead of actually watching that, he'd rather go and fight with the enemy who's promising him freedom if they win. So he can fight for his freedom, kind of an American principle if you really think about it, or he can sit around and just be a slave and do whatever, whoever this guy over here wants, whoever this guy over here is, do whatever he wants him to do. That's kind of stupid. Everybody watching this video and anybody not watching this video, in their mind is at least saying, I'd fight for my freedom. That's what slaves did. That's what pissed off Francis Scott Key, a lawyer, a Maryland lawyer who did everything in his power to keep slavery in place. Did everything in his power to go after slaves. He wrote the national anthem a couple of hundred years ago. And then around 100 years ago, we put that in as a propaganda source, as a source of propaganda to, again, uplift the spirits of the people, give them a national song, something they can all sing together, something they can all relate to. And then someone somewhere said, ooh, either before, during, after it first debuted, someone said, oh, look at that third verse. Life in the United States wasn't great for black people at that time, but someone had the common sense to say that might be a little bit divisive. So they axed that third verse. Now you're sitting out there thinking to yourself, okay, so they got rid of the third verse. What's the big deal? Wow. Okay. So how would you feel? I mean, I'm assuming that the person that's watching this right now is not a racist. I'm just going to make that assumption. I make that assumption generally with people. So I'm going to make that assumption here. If your next door neighbor did business with the Ku Klux Klan, went to their stores and bought their wares and supported them, but then said, well, I don't actually lynch any black people. So, I mean, come on. No, stop that. You do the first two verses. It's just, you may as well do the third one as well. You already know the third one is there. It's part of the song. Why not just get rid of the song? Now think about what Colin Kaepernick is actually protesting against. Police brutality in the United States. Think about the time period that Admiral Harris was actually talking about. 1941. In the United States. It would be another 24, almost 25 years before the law said that black people deserve civil rights. That was just the law, not the general populace, just the law. At the time that Admiral Harris, that Admiral Harris is talking about, some of the men and women in his own Navy could, if they were even allowed to serve in his own Navy, were not even allowed the same rights as their white companions. To make it worse, when they came home from these wars, they were treated like crap. So generally, before the Vietnam War, our veterans were celebrated. They came home to parades and hugs and kisses and free things and all the heroes' welcomes that you hear and see about on television. Not the black ones. They came home to be jumped in their uniforms by white people. In their uniforms, no less. So the same white guys who are yelling now, we're talking about 1940. So let's say, that's some of these guys are in their 80s now, and they've had children. Some of them are probably racist too. But come on, really? Our guys got jumped in their uniforms. Our guys were spit on. When I say our guys, I mean people of my skin color. But really, they're Americans. But you wouldn't know it from the way that Admiral Harris was speaking. He's talking about how they would feel with Colin Kaepernick kneeling and how they wouldn't kneel. I would hope they would kneel. I would hope that if they're actually fighting for their freedoms, that they'd actually take a knee and say, you know what, this is what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for that man over there not to be beaten in the street by a cop. Walter Scott, think about that. A jury said, we're not sure if this cop was wrong in killing him. Huh? He ran from a cop. Cops aren't judge, jury, and executioners. That's why we have judges, juries, police, and executioners. Everybody has their own jobs to do. What right did he have to take that man's life when that man was threatening no one's life? Did those jurors forget that what they saw in that videotape? Michael Slager literally shot at Walter Scott 7 times, hitting him 5 times in the back from 30 paces. In the back. Not only did he shoot him in the back, but then he lied and said, suspect just tried to take my taser. No, he didn't, my man. He didn't try to take your taser. He ran from you. You dropped your taser, and then you know what you did? You went back in front of good cops, you picked up your taser, and you dropped it next to the victim. Now, if you were doing everything properly, why'd you pick up your taser and then drop it next to the victim's body? So, why would you need to do that? Why not pick up your taser and put it into an evidence bag or reholster it? I mean, why pick it up and drop it next to the body if you were doing everything on the up and up? And then how can we not get that man prosecuted when he's on tape doing these things to the fullest extent of the law? That's why Colin Kaepernick is kneeling. That's what our veterans actually fight for. You can see more of what I do in writing. You can always subscribe to this He's Heating Up channel, of course. You can check up he'sheatingup.com, which is a place where I store a lot of things that I write and drivel about. You can check me out on Facebook at Iago the Dragon. So at Iago the Dragon on Facebook. I do some public posts there. And hopefully I'll be posting a little bit more on YouTube. Thanks. Have a good day.